The default place for Logic to store its files is in your user folder, Music, Logic. And this is also the default place for iTunes to store the entire iTunes media folder, and for different apps to store things to do with music. This is a Logic file, so let's grab one, let's say recordings of my Year 9s doing performances. This is a Logic file, except it's not really just a file, it's actually a package. Hidden beneath this facade is basically a folder, and if you click on Show Package Contents, it shows you the contents of that folder. The most important things are in Media, Audio Files, and you can see these are where all the AIFs or WAVs or whatever you've recorded will be. There's also a bunch of other files that may or may not be included in your project, and it's basically a database of different files that Logic then pulls together into your project. But sometimes Logic doesn't store the files here. Sometimes the files can be stored somewhere else on the hard drive, and Logic just knows the address. So you may have sometimes, occasionally when your project gets very big, I suppose, when you've lost a file, you open up Logic and it goes, oh, I can't locate this file, because you've either deleted it from somewhere on the hard drive or something's gone a bit wrong and it's looking for a file that doesn't exist, or at least is in a different place to where it's expected to find it. So it would be helpful if we can make sure all of the files for this project are located within it, because if they're not, you run the risk of deleting them from somewhere else on the hard drive, or when you send them to the examiner, they won't see them because they're still on your hard drive and not in the project. So we need to consolidate, which means to get all of the files that Logic needs for this project and dump them in the project. If they're not there already, obviously if they are there, then it won't make a change. So we go to File, Project Management, and go for Consolidate. And Consolidate, as I say, brings all of the different bits that your project needs into the actual project. So of course this is just untitled at the moment, but it could copy audio files that are no longer or that are not in the project, that's somewhere else. EXS24, sampler instruments, Alchemy audio data. I tend not to select that because Alchemy is so huge and the patches are enormous, and generally if those aren't in your target computer, then you've got problems anyway. If you're using a movie file, you can actually dump the movie file in there. Of course, those can be massive. Apple Sound Library content, again, not generally necessary because we're using Macs that are updated to the same spec, updated to include the same Apple library sound, etc., etc. But for safety, you could click all of these, and then it consolidates copies assets used by any alternative of the current project. So also any alternatives that you've made. And we haven't really done this, but you can look into making different alternatives, which is basically just creating a different different settings for your project to use. So if you click OK, it will grab all of those files. Of course, there are none for the moment because actually nothing is here, and it will consolidate them successfully in your project. The other thing to be aware of with regards to management is this cleanup. Now again, when your project's getting bigger and bigger, you could find that you've recorded lots and lots of things that don't actually need to be there in your project. So if they're not used in the project, in the tracks area, click on Cleanup. And what it will do, you can delete unused files that aren't actually being used in your tracks area. Obviously don't delete stuff that you're going to use, but once you get to the very end of your project and you know that things aren't going to be used, it's safe to do this. Deleting backups that is made automatically, deleting media browser files, and it's totally safe after you've done all this stuff to click OK. Obviously always best to save another project name to make sure that you do have a backup of those, but that's totally possible to do, and you should probably do that before sending it off to the examiner so that it doesn't have all of those extra backup files and so that we're not saving lots and lots and lots of stuff onto DVD.